Hello and welcome back, or welcome, yeah, I guess welcome back, or welcome to Jake Reads Comics. Um, as always, the show is brought to you by Astounding Tales, the comic that Ray Griffith and I make together. Uh, so today we'll be doing one of my favorite, if not favorite, Superman stories uh, of all. Whatever Happened to Man Tomorrow. Alan Moore, Curt Swan on the art duties, George Perez inking. I do own this in trade, but this actual copy I'm going through is from the public library, not my local public library, nearby public library. It's part of the Nassau County system. Um, so that's one of the things. If you live in kind of an urban or suburban area, your library is a great resource for comics. But also, like I said, if you kind of live in an urban or suburban area, your library may be connected to a larger library system. Will give you access to books, movies, and comics at other libraries. Also, if you live near like a college or university, they often will have a cool library as well. Um, so yeah, this is a nice hardcover. It's also the deluxe edition, so it's got some other Alan Moore DC Superman comics in it. It also has so the two issues, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, um, Swamp Thing Superman issue, and For the Man Who Has Everything, which a lot of people are familiar with due to its adaptation by the Justice League cartoon. So let's get started. Curt Swan and George Perez are going to be handling the art duties. So that's a pretty classic combo. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is kind of the last pre-crisis story. It's basically shutting the lights, closing the door on that era of that kind of Silver Age, Bronze Age DC era of Superman. DC in the, I believe, was it 85 or 86 when this comic was coming out. It was right before Crisis, where, and this is a little blurb, but Paul Kupferberg writes about Crisis, that basically DC was rebooting their universe. This is quite common now, but kind of a new thing at the time. In the Golden Age, continuity was not really considered a thing, but especially with Marvel Comics coming out, but just in general in the Silver Age, continuity became definitely a thing people were interested in, these ongoing tales and stories mattering. And then once you start getting into the Bronze Age, you start these continuities, especially with DC characters that had uninterrupted publishing since the Golden Age. Their continuity starts becoming a little convoluted, and the popular thought of the day, and still I think some people believe this, is that's kind of inhibits new readership, that the dense continuity, the convoluted continuity prevents new readers from jumping on board. But I think this what makes these ongoing stories enjoyable is the continuity. I think, of course, you don't want to be slavish to continuity, but use it to enhance the stories, and that's what you see in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, is Alan Moore taking all that Silver Age and Bronze Age continuity and kind of giving a final story to all that stuff, and able to do it in two issues, a little bigger than normal size, but still. And you're pretty much saying goodbye to that Superman, because shortly after this, John Byrne will reboot Superman with Man of Steel. So some differences will definitely, Krypton is depicted different in that post-Byrne era, drawing a lot from the movie. But we got Bizarro, Legion of Superheroes. All that is going to be depicted in this issue, and also Curt Swan and George Perez on the art duties. One of the things I think that's really nice about that is you have the Curt Swan classic Superman, and then that George Perez doing the inks kind of updates a little bit and kind of gives you, for the 80s, a state-of-the-art looking Superman with also the classic feel. This little blurb is one of my favorite pieces of dialogue, or not dialogue, but prose in any comic, and I think really sums up the idea of what is canon and continuity, and where kind of how should we think about it. This is an imaginary story, which may never happen, but then again may, about a perfect man who came from the sky and did only good. It tells you his twilight, when the great battles were over and the great miracles long since performed, of how his enemies conspired against him, and of that final war in the snowblind waste beneath the northern lights, of the women he loved and the choice he made between them, of how he broke his most sacred oath, and how finally all the things he had were taken from him save one. It was with a wink. It begins in a quiet midwestern town one summer afternoon, and in the quiet midwestern future, away in the big city, people still sometimes glance up hopefully from the sidewalks, glimpse a distant spectacle in the sky, but no, it's only a bird, only a plane. Superman died 10 years ago. This is an imaginary story. Aren't they all? And that little bit is kind of what I find so powerful in terms of thinking about these ongoing stories, these corporate IP that are stories that go on for decades and decades and decades. So we start out with a reporter coming to interview Lois Lane, seeing how she's one of the people that knew Superman so well, and kind of in the days since, what's her opinions on this world without Superman. So we kind of live in these it's slightly futuristic, so I guess this would be kind of the 90s or early aughts. We do see a little foreshadowing of a baby, but then we kind of flash back, or not kind of, we do flash back to, if you were reading this when it's published, the contemporary Superman. This is late Bronze Age, pre-crisis Superman. Jimmy of the time, Lois of the time. And of course we have Curt Swan, who's since the Silver Age was the main Superman guy, the depiction of Superman. When we see Superman in those decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, when he's licensed, when he's on Underoos and stuff like that, it's the Curt Swan Superman. And a classic Silver Age character, Bizarro, the imperfect Superman. And we see the last days of Bizarro. Uses blue kryptonite, and he ends it. It didn't make any sense at all, even by Bizarro standards. But that's what we kind of see is, like I said, Alan Moore's writing those final Superman issues. He's closing the door on this Superman that we've known for decades. Next we see is the end of Clark Kent. The toy man sends these little toy dolls, and they take apart Clark's costume, revealing that beneath that disguise he is Superman. Something that happened during the Bronze Age to try to before they totally rebooted Superman, they did want to try to make him more for the modern times and contemporary times, because after Superman the movie, which gave the comics a nice boost, DC Comics, and DC in particular, but Superman comics as well, quickly were losing ground to Marvel Comics. And Superman, which I think in his heyday, when we're talking about the radio show era, Golden Age Comics, he's moving like 1 million units. And then even into the 70s, he's moving hundreds of thousands, 500,000 units, one of the top sellers, the Superman family of comics. But by the time we're getting to this mid-80s era, maybe Superman maybe barely in the top 10, is probably a top 20 comic, and then kind of DC falls off after that. But at any rate, so we see Toyman's attack reveals who Clark really is, or rather that Superman is Clark Kent. But worse than that, we also see that stuffed in the box is Pete Ross, that one of the people that knew Clark's identity as Superman, who's known Superman since he was in Smallville. But Superman's able to follow the radio waves using his since his superpowers. I guess supervision allows him to see the radio waves. Gets Toyman and Prankster. One of the things he notes is, or I think it's actually Lois is the one who notes it, that Superman's villains that were kind of considered nuisances in the Silver Age are now coming back as deadly foes, killing Pete Ross, for example. And this is kind of a foreshadowing to the more grim and gritty superheroes that we're going to get in the Bronze Age and then into the 90s. Not just grim and gritty, because I think sometimes, or oftentimes, a lot of those 90s comics can be somewhat camp. That they're kind of a failed seriousness that almost becomes silly. But I think a lot of people conflate or use the term grim and gritty when they're describing just more violent comic books in general. So this is kind of foreshadowing comic books that are a little more violent and maybe also aimed at an older audience, where comics, especially something like a DC comic, Superman, is aimed at your 7-8-year-old could read it no problem. That maybe a Marvel Comics, The Punisher, which was very popular, I was a big fan of in the late 80s, early 90s, or characters like Wolverine, maybe for more 12-year-old, where it's a little more graphic violence. Now, not much more. There's still comic code comics, but a little more moving towards more adults in their depiction of violence. I wouldn't say more adult in certain themes, or there's still comics aimed at a 10, 12-year-old, but a little more adult in terms of the depiction of violence. Then we have Brainiac and Lex Luthor. I think one of the shames of the reboot with the Man of Steel is that we didn't get long with this Brainiac. This I really enjoyed when I was a kid. This depiction of Brainiac really captured my imagination. I didn't really see many stories. I was born in 83, so really the Byrne post-crisis Superman in terms of comics was a lot of the Superman comics I read. But I did read some older comics when I was a kid, but also the licensed depiction of Brainiac in kind of the mid-late 80s is kind of this version of Brainiac, the all-robotic kind of skull ship Brainiac, and just kind of not even reading in Superman comics, but just in things like cartoons, other licensed stuff where you kind of see this depiction of Brainiac that really captured my imagination when I was a kid. And Brainiac at some point before the story was destroyed by Superman, and Luthor's out trying to detect him to get the superior technology, but it was really a ruse by Brainiac. So Lex Luthor, it's really a trap for Lex, and Brainiac takes over the body. He doesn't have a physical body, but has a few, I guess, working computer parts, and takes hold of Luthor. We have, but not one Metallo. We have many Metallos attacking. It's not the Daily Planet. It's, I guess, the television station where Clark and Lois work at. Again, trying to modernize it. He's no longer a TV reporter, or no longer a newspaper reporter. He's now a TV anchorman. I think still the newspaper reporter works better, because a TV anchorman, especially if you're reporting live, has to be somewhere at a specific time, and Superman or Clark's being a newspaper reporter gives him a good cover story, why he's certain places or why he might be missing for extended periods of time. But anyway, we have, again, settling up all old business and doing it pretty rapidly, but still giving it some pathos. We have Metallo, or Metallos, the Kryptonite Man, So Superman realizes that for some reason, all his greatest foes or his really greatest hits from his rogues gallery are attacking him and also his loved ones, especially now that everyone knows his secret identity. So he gathers them up. Perry White, Perry's wife, Lois, Lana Lang, um, Jimmy Olsen, and brings them to the Fortress of Solitude. One of the things I love about both the Batcave and the Fortress of Solitude are the cool little trophies, and especially if you're saying goodbye to the Silver and Bronze Age Superman, that classic Superman, you got to go with the Fortress of Solitude. That's one of my favorite things of the Silver Age is kind of the Fortress of Solitude, the Superman robots, all that wacky science fiction stuff. So Krypto returns. And really, Alan Moore handles Krypto fantastic. The older I get, the more I love things like the Super Pets, the Pet Avengers. So when I was maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that may have bugged me because I loved comics and thought these things should be taken seriously, especially in an era where I think 89, 90, 89, 90, 91, when I'm 7, 8 years old, we have Tim Burton's Batman, and that's kind of considered, especially at the time, a very serious take on Batman. You got Dark Knight Returns, but also Adam West's Batman still looms large, and the idea of superheroes being silly or campy. And the Adam West show, actually, when I was a kid, used to make me very angry because I said, Superman, a 6-year-old me was very indignant. Superman's not silly. He needs to be taken seriously. Or rather, Batman's not silly. He's serious and needs to be taken seriously. But anyway, now as a middle-aged man, I love concepts like Krypto. He's the bestest boy. Nothing like, a Superboy needs a super dog, a dog and his boy. It's a classic combination, all-American trope. So we have the Luthor Brainiac combo preparing for his assault on Superman, and so Kryptonite Man is taken up into the Skull Ship to go to the Fortress of Solitude. People are worried. Again, we're getting quote-unquote more adult. And obviously Alan Moore with Watchmen brought the idea of like, what if superheroes existed in a real world? And so we have Perry and his wife are divorced, unfortunately, or going through some hard times. I think one of the important things to note with the idea of like Alan Moore and Watchmen and asking the question of what if superheroes are real, I think that's been kind of extended to a shorthand for a lot of Moore's work when people are discussing it. But I don't think necessarily that's what even though that's considered what he brought to comics, especially in these 80s DC comics, I think really it's just the idea of that the comics are literary and making them literary is really the influence that Alan Moore brought to comic books. Especially in terms of kind of his references being well read. You could see that with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So I think Grant Morrison, they take a literary approach to the canon of DC Comics or Marvel Comics. When Grant Morrison, when they write X-Men, I feel they did the same thing with their depiction of Magneto, going more towards a Kirby depiction of Magneto, is taking what some could consider silly, the Silver Age concepts, and giving them a literary treatment, or taking them considering them in a literary light. So we have Supergirl now and the Legion of Superheroes. Oh, and then Lana and Lois kind of commiserating together. Again, he gives pathos in real moments. Even though we're kind of moving through all these characters, all these concepts, basically the last moments and panels of all these concepts before we reboot Superman. So it's at a breakneck pace, but we still have these moments. And I think that's one of the things that Alan Moore really does superbly in this comic, is you have a whirlwind pace, similar to almost like a Kirby Fantastic Four comic, or just Kirby in general, where it's just every panel, every page is all these amazing concepts, ideas, characters, but he's still they're these kind of these moments in time and giving them really pathos. So the two women who love Clark the most kind of crying, sharing a moment. Then the Legion of Superheroes. They know that this is going to be, they know Superman's future. They know this is his kind of last days, but they don't want to give away too much. But this statue kind of is something that will help be a clue for how kind of Superman resolves his dilemmas. So we have the best boy, Super Dog, Crypto, staying with his master. You know, dogs are awesome. We all love dogs. And this is 2 issues, so we have the second issue that is going to kind of wrap up Silver Age, Bronze Age, Superman, the Superman of at the time of publishing that was about to be reboot. We're closing that door in this particular DC universe. And I think also what bears mentioning, or I believe what bears mentioning, is Alan Moore's Twilight of the superheroes pitch for DC. One of an unrealized pitch of kind of the end of the, here he's presenting the last days of Superman was the last days of the DC universe. And I think from Watchmen, I think a lot of people have taken the wrong lessons, and it seems like with that, looking at that pitch, Alan Moore may have taken the wrong lessons from his own work in terms of the quote-unquote grim and gritty violence, murder, graphic depictions of things, in terms of that script as well, or that pitch. That when what you look here, it's not really any kind of violence or grim or grittiness, quote-unquote, that makes this comic or this story work. It's just the literary approach, taking this seriously, and well written, obviously first class art, but I think the literary approach, you know, treating this as it matters, but not making it campy in terms of using the definition of campy being a failed seriousness. It's never over the top serious, which I think is one of the mistakes Zack Snyder's adaptations or depictions of DC heroes are, is he takes it over seriousness that then borders into kind of campy, but almost like a failed seriousness. I think with Alan Moore's approach, and I think you could see it in these 2 stories, he takes it seriously, it's well written, but it's not an over seriousness. So burning his giant key. Again, the idea of we're going to see the reboot of Superman, and I guess one of the ideas of this reboot of Superman is kind of take away some of this, what's considered the more sillier elements. But I think now, and maybe I thought differently as a 10 or 12-year-old, maybe I would consider them serious or silly, but now as an adult, I think that they're wonderful, whimsical concepts, like the giant key that's so heavy only Superman can lift it, and that's how you enter the Fortress of Solitude. He's melting away because he's worried about attack. He doesn't want to give people easy access to the fortress. Superman is destroying the key, preparing for a siege, the siege of the Fortress of Solitude. Kind of foreshadowing the future of comics, that as the 80s roll into the 90s and people become uber serious and always grimacing, kind of think of Rob Liefeld X-Force comics, kind of everyone's just always kind of grimacing like they're constipated and big guns and stuff like that. I kind of lament the kind of foreshadowing on a meta level that the melting of the giant key of the Fortress of Solitude represents. So we have the Legion of Supervillains. Again, a Silver Age concept. First drawn by Curt Swan, thought up by, I don't know if they're thought up by Jim Shooter, but he definitely wrote a bunch of Legion comics that depict also the Legion of supervillains. But they quickly depart when they realize that Superman is not playing lightly. They know that this is Superman's last stand, and they want to be a part of it. Something that happens that Brainiac didn't account for is that there is a force bubble suddenly goes around the Fortress of Solitude. I like is at the we have Superman's friends at his greatest need trying to get in, try to help. So at this time, we have their world's finest since Batman and Superman are best friends for decades now. They're super friends, dare I say. So we got Superman, and at the time, that would I don't believe that would be Dick Grayson. That'd be Jason Todd, but Batman and Robin nonetheless. Captain Marvel, being integrated into Marvel Comics. DC bought Fawcett Comics, and that's always something they've been trying to do for decades now, to varying successes, trying to integrate those Fawcett characters like Captain Marvel. But this is the twilight of a bygone era, so why not have Captain Marvel in there? I also like that they have an Elliot Magnin. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct. A character in here, a classic Superman writer in one of his Superman novels. This is a Superwoman from the future that I believe technology gives her power. And I always forget who this guy is, and the weird bald guy with the long with the long leggings. I always have to look that up, but that's the fun of this comic too, is kind of all the references and the deep dives, and the little Easter eggs that Alan Moore fits into here. Superman taking a page out to talk to Perry White. Again, everyone gets their moments. Again, reference to the Silver Age. That Lana Lang and especially Jimmy always taking different potions, and different wacky things happen as Jimmy in the Silver Age, like turning into the famously like a giant turtle or a witch doctor Jimmy. So these things all exist in the Fortress of Solitude. So here we the magic lake water that gives Lana Lang her superpowers. And the serum that turns Jimmy into Elastalad. They're gonna help Clark out. Because they're his best friends. But also them going into battle gives us kind of, again, the last days of these characters. So unfortunately, they will meet their demise from the Legion of Supervillains. But Clark's enraged by their demise. Here we see more classic DC characters: Martian Manhunter, Green Arrow, Hawkman, all not wanting to help their friend, the greatest of all of them, Superman, but not able to. They know through the Lex, or rather Brainiac knows through the Legion of Supervillains, because they have they are obviously from the future, that this is the time when Superman will be defeated by his greatest foe. Brainiac is caught off guard because Lana Lang snapped his neck, so Luthor is slowly dying, or the body is dying, which is the host for Brainiac. So Brainiac is pretty confused what's going on here. If Superman is supposed to be fallen by his greatest foe, why is both Brainiac and Luthor kind of out of the picture? The Kryptonite Man is killed by Crypto, and this is one of the saddest parts. I don't know if any of you out there in the internet, in the interwebs are like me, but depictions of animals being harmed, so for me, oftentimes more upsetting than seeing depictions of human violence or humans being harmed. So Crypto protecting his master, being the bestest boy, but also because he's a Kryptonian dog, is poisoned by the kryptonite. Pete Ross, Lana, Jimmy, now Crypto was gone as well. I was with Superman when he heard his pet's death howl, but we couldn't do anything. A reference to Bruce and Bruce and Dick Grayson as Nightwing and Flamebird. Laurie Lemeris, Superman, another of his loves. Superman loves mermaids. So again, chock full of references, this comic. It's just fantastic for that. One of the things I like about many people don't like the Frank Miller Year One, I believe it's called Year One Superman, but the Frank Miller Superman, young Superman, his first years as Superman. One of the things I love for that comic is it really embraces Superman's early love, Laurie Lamoris. Superman bangs mermaids. It's canon. Most iterations of Superman, he loves, and women with two L's, early comics, alliteration, Peter Parker, Lana Lang, but the double L is also specific with Superman comics, like Laurie Lemeris, Lana Lang, Lex Luthor, Lois Lane. So that double L is a big thing in the Superman, double L alliteration's big in Superman comics. Lana Lang, once he finds out they killed Lana, he means business, and that's a little foreshadowing too that Superman is becoming enraged, potentially deadly. So, again, we have Brainiac, who doesn't understand what's going on without the host of Lex Luthor. He's just the little kind of skull shape element. He needs some type of host, some kind of outside power source, and with that, he powers down, and we find out Superman's greatest villain is Mr. Mitsoplex. One of those things that thankfully for comic books and stuff, or rather for cartoons, that I know how to pronounce his name. If I only had to read it, I don't know if I could ever figure out the correct pronunciation. And then we have the kind of the facial references. Malcolm McDowell. I believe they're using Malcolm McDowell as a reference. But anyway, this is one of the things I like about Mitsoplex, that he's this immortal being. He's this imp from a fifth dimension. Does Superman really think, or did we all think, that he was always this kind of little impish kind of guy in a derby? That he has infinity to wait around. So for millennia, he was good, he was bad. For a while he just tried to be this kind of mischievous imp. And then we kind of see this kind of malevolent depiction of him. And he's saying this is kind of more his true form. And Superman, Mitsoplex obviously confronts Superman. Does he think really a power, an omnipotent being, that Superman could defeat someone like him? And Superman agrees and uses the Phantom Zone projector. And Mitsoplex doesn't want to be sucked into the Phantom Zone projector, so he says his own name backwards, which, as we know, we get Mitsoplex to say his name backwards. He goes back to the fifth dimension, and because the Phantom Zone is activated at the same time he says those words, he's split in half, destroying him, killing him. Phantom Zone criminals in the background. Phantom Zone criminals, more cool Silver Age references. The Phantom Zone criminals. So Superman breaks his only rule, that with all his powers torn it, here he gives the explanation, torn in half between dimensions. He panicked when he saw the ray and made a fatal error. Just as I know he would. I killed him, Lois. I intended to kill him. I just couldn't risk letting anything that powerful and malignant survive. So I made up my mind and I did it. I broke my oath. I killed him. So because he broke his oath, he goes into the gold kryptonite room, and different colored kryptonites is also another reference to kind of Silver Age silliness, that different kind of kryptonites do different things. Gold kryptonite rends Kryptonians powerless. So all the interesting wonders and different types of kryptonite held in the Fortress of Solitude. Those are the kind of the last days of Superman. Then it goes back to what would be, this all takes place in flashback to Lois. Lois's husband returns home. The reporter kind of wraps up. And we see that her husband's this kind of tall, handsome guy with a mustache. And their baby has kind of Superman-esque hair. And the other thing we see is that the baby is crushing coal into diamonds. And we'll end it with the Curt Swan wink. All right, there's nothing more Superman-y than the Curt Swan wink, kind of letting us know that this is kind of what happened to Superman, even though a lot of people think he wandered out into the cold wasteland of the Arctic to die powerless. We know that he lives with Lois as a normal dude, but who knows, their kid maybe. This little baby crushing coal into diamonds might be the future next Superman. But the end. As always, Jake Reads Comics is brought to you by Astounding Tales. Astounding Tales is the comic that Ray Griffith and I collaborate to produce. Astounding Tales Issue 0 and Astounding Tales Issue 1 are out now, with the Kickstarter for issue number 2 being released shortly.